Hello and good evening and welcome to this webinar on budgeting and cost control. Uh, as per our regular introduction, we start by my own experience in project management and what I've concluded through the years with regard to what I refer to Dr. Akram's 6 principles for effective projects management, given a competent projects manager on board. It's very important to note here, without a competent project manager, uh, all what we discuss with regards to project management and excellence techniques, project management excellence techniques and processes are not going to provide the anticipated value expected from them unless a competent project manager is appointed. So it's very important to understand that the number one success factor for projects is the appointment of a named project manager. What does this mean to us? It means a project charter. Each and every project must have a project charter, and the project charter must state clearly the name of the project manager. So our first principle, which is related to inputs. Our second principle is fundamental, and it's related to the need for the project manager to deeply understand the different aspects of management, which is divided into administration and leadership. Now, the third principle, which is maintain visibility using S-curves and earned value analysis, and it is something we are going to elaborate on during our webinar today on budgeting and cost control. Fourth principle, differentiate between project life cycle and project management life cycle. Fifth principle, differentiate between project deliverables and project management deliverables. And finally, sixth principle, use project management software for all projects proficiently. Also, we are going to visit this principle during our webinar today. Okay, now some basic and very important definitions as related to project management, which we have to fully comprehend the distinctions between them. Planning is a process of choosing the method and order of work. Scheduling, on the other hand, is a process of determining the interrelationship of associated timings and operations. So planning is choosing tools and techniques and methods of work. So it answers to how we are going to perform a certain task, while scheduling answers to when we are going to perform a certain task. So let's warm up for today's discussion through these comic strips, which actually illustrates a very common real life situation. So the executive manager is asking the technical or IT project manager, how much will it cost to develop our next generation product. So the technical manager is a very sarcastic figure. For those familiar with this comic strips, I think his name is Bart. So he will just give us a sarcastic remark. It will cost whatever you put in the budget. So in reality, we always ask project managers to understand the customer and understand customer could be internal customer or external customer, and the project manager needs to understand the sensitivity of the customer. Is the customer time sensitive, or is the customer finances sensitive? Maybe the customer is not sensitive to finances and is not sensitive to time. However, the customer is sensitive to scope and correctness of solution. So understanding the customer requirements will definitely, with regards to customer sensitivity, will definitely set the appropriate path for success for the project manager moving forward in managing the dedicated project. So here he is assuming as a standard customer, or most customers, the standard is they are sensitive to cost. So here the assumption, the customer is sensitive to costs, so he's giving a sarcastic remark saying it will cost whatever you put in the budget. So his manager is not very bright or creative, so he's just asking him, how much should I put in the budget? Again, the technical does not want to commit a number because it's too early to tell. So he says, ask for the biggest number you think will get approved. Again, as a project manager, always, and especially designers, when we talk about designers, engineers, or IT, designing systems, system designers in IT, usually a designer wants to end up with the Mercedes of it all, the Mercedes-Benz of it all. So if you allow any designer or any engineer a free hand and an open account for expenses, there is no end for improving and upgrading the design to infinity. And a very clear example we all remember and know is the designer of the Titanic ship as we have seen him in the movies. So he wanted to design a ship that is unsinkable and the state of the art in every engineering aspect known at the time it was designed and built. So here he's telling him, ask for the biggest number you think will get approved. So if we get a lot of money, we can build something great. If we don't get much money, we can build something lame and compensate for the lack of quality by lying more vigorously than usual. So the manager is not convinced, so he says, I will aim low so I don't get yelled at during the executive budget meeting. So he ignored all what he heard and he decided to ask for a low budget anyway. And here the engineer is continuing to be sarcastic about it. So this brings us to our discussion for today, which is related to the importance of project cost budgeting and project cost management. uh, and again, to rephrase what this example illustrates, most projects, almost all projects, even time-sensitive projects and correctness of solution and scope-sensitive projects are essentially financially sensitive projects. So when we talk about cost management and budgeting, it's a make or break any project. So cost management, and when you work in big project, you will realize that the side of cost actually has so many people working on it. You have people in finance trying to provide and allocate budgets. You have people from accounting calculating and adding everything spent or gained. You will have people from contracts reviewing everything. You have people from purchasing trying to get best deals and so on. So the money side of projects is very important, and most of these people are outside the span of control of the project manager. So the project manager has to really understand his role in budgeting and cost control, as well as understand the roles of the other stakeholders as related to budgeting and cost control, and understand their angles or what is important to each member. For example, the finance manager does not want to spend a lot of money. The accounting manager, for example, wants to have all data by 28th of each month so he can finalize his calculations for the month correctly, for example, and so on. So these are very, very important stakeholders, and management decisions, maybe 1 tier, 2 tiers, 10 tiers, 100 tiers above the project manager, are drawn almost every day based on financial reports and financial results generated outside the project manager. So the project manager has to be very diligent in dealing with finances, as well as be very competent in understanding the underlying logic of each and every step of the financial and accounting processes as related to the project. So here, let's again go into where the project manager has input or influence as with regards to project budgeting and cost control. So IT projects have a poor track record for meeting budget goals. It's not only IT projects, but this example or this textbook is primarily referring to IT projects because, like we all know, the boom in project management profession itself in the recent years is driven mainly by technology projects. So using technology projects as a standard reference for project management is very understandable. Okay, so the chaos studies found that the average cost overrun the additional percentage or dollar amount by which actual costs exceed estimates ranged from 180% in 1994 to 43% in 2002. Other studies found overruns to be 33 to 34%. Okay. The standard normal practice is to estimate a contingency of 50% cost overrun. So if a project is budgeted for $10,000 and closes at around $15,000, it does not require deep investigation why there is a cost overrun. But if it exceeds 50%, then very detailed justification has to be added to the project documentation, explaining the reason for the cost overrun to exceed the customary or customary acceptable rate of 50% projects overrun. However, this is considered like industry standard in many industries, but from one industry to other industry it differs. So for example, the estimate for IT industry as per this study is 43%. Another industry, like for example shipbuilding, it might be 80%, 90%, 100%, or even still above 100%. So you can pay double your original budget. So each industry is different. However, what's normal for where I used to have experience in the petrochemical industry in my home country of Egypt, it's customary to consider 50% cost overrun as acceptable or anticipated and expected. Again, if you are a contractor and you close a project less than your budget, it's not always a good thing, because tenders, when I bid for a tender as a contractor, I base my tender price on the calculated budget. So if my project manager puts a very huge margin resulting in an inflated cost for the project, I might lose my bids. So one KPI I have to be very, very, very vigilant and look out to, which is the percentage of the project closing compared to the bid price. If it's a little bit above the bid price, it's normal and customary, because we say a cost overrun 50% is expected. But if it closes at 99%, even not even 80 or 90%, it's just 1% less, then a very thorough investigation has to be carried, and an exhaustive report detailing and explaining why the project closed at a price less than budgeted. Because once again, overpricing will mean I could lose my bids. And if I lose my bids, I will eventually end up out of business. So it's very, very important to understand that the KPI of comparing the project budget before and after is a very fundamental and a very important KPI to look out for. Okay, so what is cost and project cost management? So cost is a resource sacrificed or foregone to achieve a specific objective or something given up in exchange. Costs are usually measured in monetary units such as dollars, while project cost management includes the processes required to ensure that the project is completed within an approved budget. So cost management process, we have our input to the process using scope baseline and schedule baseline, and we use it to generate cost estimates, and an output of the tools and techniques of cost estimate process are estimate bases and activity cost estimates, and I use it and enter another process of determine budget, and the output of determine budget is project funding requirements and cost baseline, and I shall use these outputs to perform cost control. So cost management involves three processes: cost estimation, budget determination, and cost control. So project cost management processes are cost estimating, which is developing an approximation or estimate of the costs of the resources needed to complete a project. Cost budgeting, allocating the overall cost estimate to individual work items to establish a baseline for measuring performance. Cost control is controlling changes to the project budget. What could cause a change to the project budget? The changes in prices, grade, like for example, changing the grade to a higher quality grade, requiring more quality control and more testing, additional scope, inflation of the raw materials or inputs to the project, and so forth. So there are unexpected things that could happen during a project life span, and the project manager has to be aware and alert to navigate and manage changes progressively. And what we call it, and proactively, you have to have, the project manager has to proactively assess and manage changes to the project budget. So, so cost management processes are part of planning and part of monitoring and controlling. So we have planning cost management, we have estimating cost, we have determining budget, and we have outputs, cost management plan, activity cost estimates, cost performance baseline, and monitoring and controlling. We have metrics of work performance measurement and budget forecasts. So again, the same information again as time is given. We have the planning early at the beginning of the project, and soon afterwards we start to deploy monitoring and controlling to the project. So basic principles of cost management and it's related to management of stakeholders. So it stipulates most members of an executive board have a better understanding and are more interested in financial terms than technical terms. So technical, for example, IT project managers must speak their language. So profits are revenues minus expenses. Life cycle costing considers the total cost of ownership or development plus support costs for a project. Cash flow analysis, a method to determine the estimated annual costs and benefits for a project and the resulting annual cash flow. So here we again are reflecting on the importance of cost management and budgeting, because if, and we can go back to our cartoon example, if we don't have sufficient budget, we are going to face problems during the project development and execution phase. So here, for a certain organization, they have cost of downtime of their IT applications. So they estimated it as cost per minute. So why a project manager or an IT manager needs to have such information at hand? Because it helps decision makers who allocate budget for the project to make an educated and informed decision. So if each minute of downtime is going to cost all these amount of monies, which here in this example is in excess of $100,000. So when I ask for a project with a budget 1 million, 2 million, or whatever, it's totally justifiable because each minute costs me more than $100,000. So why do I need budget? Because if I don't have budget and I don't have plan on how to spend my resources properly, I'm going to get the budget after a crisis takes place. If they don't approve my budget at the beginning of the project, when the project faces difficulties, a certain budget, additional budget might be approved for the project based on a problem that took place. But why this is wrong? For example, if I detect a defect during user requirements, it will typically cost me from $100 to $1,000 to correct it. Again, we are using an IT example. If I discover it during coding and unit testing, it's going to cost at least $1,000. If I discover it during system testing, it's going to cost from $7,000 to $8,000 per mistake. If I discover it during acceptance testing, it might cost me up to $100,000. And if I discover it after implementation, it could cost me up to millions of dollars. So I need to have my budget to consider this when I'm creating my budget. Like it's stated here, it is important to spend money up front on IT projects to avoid spending a lot more later. So I need a budget and I need a cost baseline which allocates budget or combines budget and schedule. so that I can have enough resources way up front to make sure I am progressing uh, on the right track. So let's again have some definitions and basic principles of cost management. We have tangible costs or benefits, and these are costs or benefits that an organization can easily measure in dollars. So if it is something we can grab, we call it tangible. Intangible costs or benefits are costs or benefits that are difficult to measure in monetary terms. Direct costs are costs that can be directly related to producing the products and services of the project, for example, salaries and raw materials. Indirect costs are costs that are not directly related to the products or services of the project, but are indirectly related to performing the project. For example, electricity, rent, and all the other overheads. Sunk cost is money that has been spent in the past. When deciding what projects to invest in or continue, you should not include sunk costs. So again, some more definitions. Learning curve theory states that when many items are produced repetitively, the unit cost of those items decreases in a regular pattern as more units are produced. Reserves are dollars included in a cost estimate to mitigate cost risk by allowing for future situations that are difficult to predict. We have contingency reserves allow for future situations that may be partially planned for or sometimes called known unknowns and are included in the project cost baseline. So I perform my risk analysis and risk planning and risk management processes, and I decide, I come with a certain number, and this number is called contingency reserves, and it addresses re-identified risks during the risk planning and management exercises. However, there are risks we refer to as unknown unknowns, and for these risks we allocate 20 or 30% extra over the total budget just in case, and we call it management reserves. So management reserves allow for future situations that are unpredictable, which are sometimes referred to as unknown unknowns. So what we mean by cost estimating process? Cost estimating process is where project managers must take cost estimates seriously. Okay, so here it's just a hint. Project managers must take cost estimates seriously if they want to complete projects within budget constraints. It is important to know the types of cost estimates, how to prepare cost estimates, and typical problems associated with certain technical cost estimates. Here, as a project manager, sometimes, especially in construction projects, as a project manager, we have a consultant or design consultant, and it is part of the design consultant duty to provide cost estimates. Now, the design consultant even though he will be designing a Mercedes-Benz, he will try to display his design as an inexpensive design. So he will only put more or less the direct costs and include indirect costs, diluted, let's just say diluted indirect costs. So he can bring the total cost of his design down. Now, as a project manager, I have to study critically. I have to critically study such input from external entities and try to have estimate basis for each and every estimate I receive from an external party that did not enter with me in a guaranteed price agreement or contract. So unless the consultant or the contractor is into agreement with me with a maximum price agreement, I have to be very, very careful, because now the risk is buyer's risk. He will give me an estimate that it is not guaranteed in order to make the decisions to go ahead and approve the project more appealing. So what happens to me if I start the project and end up without enough money to finish it? So all these monies spent are going to end up as sunk costs, and it could even bankrupt me and could put me in default with lending bodies, and I might end up in jail or having to sell an incomplete project for a fraction of its price just to pay the debtors what they owe me, or what I owe them, sorry. So it's important to know the types of cost estimates, how to prepare cost estimates, and typical problems associated with certain technical cost estimates. So when I receive a cost estimate, for example, from a consultant, I indicate to the consultant that I need different types of estimates related to how mature the design is. So I'll accept early in the design stages a rough order of magnitude cost estimate, which is minus 25% to plus 75% accurate. So if I receive an estimate outside these numbers, then the designer or whoever is providing me with the rough order of magnitude estimate is in default. Then, as the design matures more, I request a budgetary estimate, which is minus 10% to plus 25%. Like we see, it's more accurate. Minus 10% to 25%, a budgetary estimate, so I can allocate my money and understand if I can perform this project or it's too expensive for me. And then I request a definitive estimate, which is minus 5% to plus 10%, or sometimes it's referred to as plus minus 10%. So I have to have a binding agreement that the designer has done his due diligence in estimating my project and provided me with a definitive estimate. So now, after this cost estimation, we start to do cost management planning. So a cost management plan is a document that describes how the organization will manage cost variance on the project. So here we have a very important terminology here, which is cost variance. And cost variance is the difference between planned cost and actual cost. So whenever we have discrepancy between planned cost and actual cost, we have a cost variance, and it's very important to manage cost variance as early as possible. So a large percentage of total project costs are labor costs. So project managers must develop and track estimates for labor. Describes how to respond to proposals from suppliers that are lower or higher than estimates. And this action should come after definitive estimates are received. So here is an example of a project spanning 5 years, and for each department related to the project, the number of employees, permanent employees assigned to the project are allocated during budget, and again it is monitored and controlled. So whenever we move from one year to the next, we make sure that we are maintaining our workforce checked, so that we do not have a cost overrun resulting from employees that are included within the project and are not budgeted for, and without considering them as variance and updating our budget and project baseline. So we have different cost estimation tools and techniques. We have analogous or top-down estimates, we have bottom-up estimates, we have parametric modeling, and we have computerized tools. And with regards especially to IT projects, parametric model is considered the most or the best estimation tool. So what are some typical problems with cost estimates? Developing an estimate for a large software project or any project is a complex task that requires a significant amount of effort. Estimates are done too quickly. So here again, it's very important to understand there is a phase we refer to as a pre-project, which is the project planning phase. Now, the project planning phase could be a very, very expensive phase where the project is designed and it's planned for, and unless there is budget for studies and planning a project, then the project will be very poorly planned, very poorly designed, and very poorly studied. And after approval of the project, there is a monetary debt, money that should have been paid for the pre-project phase that was not paid, and it will be deducted from the approved budget, which will result in variance and discrepancy in the remaining budget, which will damage the project severely. So here, unless there is very clear understanding within any organization that planning projects and designing projects incurs costs, and these costs must be treated as an independent project with an independent project charter and an independent budget, and we refer to this as phased gate project management. So I have a phase and I have very clear understanding what happens at the end of this phase as I reach the gate, which is the approval of the next phase. So certain outputs have to come out from the planning phase in order to be inputs to the gate of the next phase of execution, for example. So I have to understand that planning is a phase and it needs to be budgeted. So if I don't, I'm going to develop an estimate for large projects too quickly and too randomly, and it will not be accurate. People who develop estimates often do not have much experience. Again, because I don't have enough funding for the cost estimation activities, I end up using unexperienced resources to develop my cost estimates, and as they are inexperienced, the end result is inaccurate estimates. And human beings are biased toward underestimation. And management might ask for an estimate, but really desire a bid to win a major contract or get internal funding. So management desires accuracy. So again here, what he really means here, management wants me to be responsible for a number. So they come to me as a project manager and they say, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to bid for it. If I, as a project manager, give a very small amount in order to win the bid, during execution, I will not have enough money to close my project. Okay, so if I am a project manager who is going to put a very huge reserve, then my estimation will be too expensive and the company will lose the bid. So it's a very delicate balance, like we've stated earlier, when estimating, particularly when you are a contracting company who has to bid for work, and to understand that when a project closes, financial performance needs to be analyzed, and the financial performance for each and every project management needs to be evaluated with regards to accuracy of estimation. So the accuracy of estimation is a very, very important skill and a very important KPI to assess and evaluate project managers accordingly. Cost budgeting involves allocating the project cost estimates to individual work items over time. So I estimated 1 meter of concrete will cost $10, and I have 1,000 meters of concrete required to finish my project. So my budget is going to be 10 times 1,000. So I have $10,000 to finish 1,000 meters of concrete, for example. So when I say estimate, I am talking about the price or cost of one unit of a certain item. And when I say budget, I have my project estimates, the required amount of this item, and I multiply cost estimate by number required, and I end up with my budgetary number. So we need the WBS as an input for cost budgeting process because it defines work items. Important goal is to produce a cost baseline. So if I use level 1 or very high level of WBS, I will have inaccurate estimation. And if I use lower and more detailed levels of WBS to estimate, I will have more accurate estimation. So again, as a policy, my company as a policy must state clearly budgeting shall be performed on which WBS level. So a cost baseline is a time-phased budget that project managers use to measure and monitor cost performance. So here is an example of a cost baseline, which we have different items, and we have here our month, first month, second, and so on. And it is like a cash out or a cash flow kind of estimate. Cash in or cash out only, or cash in and cash out. So we have a full picture, and to understand when to have the resources allocated to the project. This is very important when you are getting a loan from the bank. The bank will only, you can have one big chunk of loan and you pay interest from day one, or you can take the loan according to whenever required, and you'll only have interest, the start of interest for each of these amounts will start on the day it is allocated to your project. So a cost baseline or a cash flow is a very important financial tool in project management because it is directly related to funding and interests incurred accordingly. So controlling costs, project cost control includes monitoring cost performance, ensuring that only appropriate project changes are included in a revised cost baseline, informing project stakeholders of authorized changes to the project that will affect cost. And many organizations around the globe have problems with cost control. So in order to deal with problems related to cost control, organizations use work performance measurement. And what we mean by work performance measurement, we mean earned value management. And like we have stated at the very beginning, our third principle is to maintain visibility using S-curves and earned value analysis. So earned value analysis is a key and very important practice in project management and in cost management. So earned value management combines scope, schedule, and budget, provides a true project health indicator, use past to predict the future, but it is only as reliable as the facts. So what you feed into your earned value analysis, if you give it good data, it will give you good analysis. If you give it bad data, it will give you bad analysis. So earned value has got some equations, and these equations are cost variance, schedule variance, cost variance percentage, schedule variance percentage, estimate at completion, schedule to complete, schedule performance index, cost performance index. So these equations and their results will give us a detailed report indicating the health of our project. So what are some rules of thumb for earned value numbers? We say negative numbers for cost and schedule variance indicate problems in those areas. So negative numbers are bad. Cost performance index and schedule performance index less than 100% is bad. Problems mean the project is costing more than planned, over budget, or taking longer than planned. It is behind schedule. The cost performance index can be used to calculate the estimate at completion, an estimate of what it will cost to complete the project based on performance to date. The budget at completion is the original total budget for the project divided by uh, cost at completion. So here is an example of what we refer to an S-curve, and it is a graphical. S-curves are graphical representation of our performance, schedule performance, combining money and time into a single diagram, and we use it to understand the different elements of our earned value analysis. Like in this example, like we see in this example, we have different colors for actual cost, for budgeted budget cost of work schedule, and budget cost of work performed, and we have the different equations, and we can deduct from the S-curve the performance of our project. Also, another graphical representation of an S-curve and describing the different parts. And like we say, we have here estimated cost at completion based on variance. Here was our planned cost. And then we have certain variance. We call it variance at completion. So we add variance at completion to our original estimate, and we get a new estimate for our project final budget. So whenever we have variance, what we should do, whenever we have variance, we need to get back on track. So to get back on track, we need to answer two questions. When do you check for variance? When do I have to check for variance? Because what if it what can be measured can be managed, what cannot be measured cannot be managed. So when do I have to measure my variance? Because if I don't measure my variance, I cannot manage it. So when do I measure my variance? When do you check for variance is one very important question. I need to measure. How frequent do I have to measure? And how to deal with variance once I discover it. So before each project status report is due, I have to study my variance because I will need to include it in my status report. Status reports are normally monthly reports. But depending on the sensitivity of the project, you might need to do variance analysis more frequent than monthly. So how do I deal with variance? I have to face the issue and deal with it as it emerges. So the first step in dealing with the variance is to find its causes, plan to take corrective actions, determine overall project impact or repetition, present the information to stakeholders, prepare to negotiate trade-offs. Okay, so I need to use software to assist in cost management. Again, now we have to go back here to our rules. Our final rule, use project management software for all projects proficiently. Again, we need to use our software. We need to use our software. Spreadsheets can be used like Excel, but it's not good enough. It's better to use a proprietary or a dedicated project management software like MS Project or Primavera. So spreadsheets are a common tool for resource planning, cost estimating, cost budgeting, and cost control. Even though agile project managers use other softwares like Jira, for example, which is no longer with us. Jira, by the way, it's cancelled. But Trello still exists. So like Jira and Trello. Jira was #1 for agile project management, but now it's gone. And we have Trello, for example, or Miro, or whatever. But I prefer to still use Primavera and or MS Project for project management, even for agile projects. And the reason is Primavera and MS Project generate earned value analysis reports and generate S-curves. So if I'm going to use an agile project management software, I have to select an agile project management software that supports the generation of earned value analysis for agile projects. So many companies use more sophisticated and centralized financial applications. Project management software has many cost-related features, especially enterprise project management software. And here is a dashboard example for portfolio management screen showing project health. So it gives you a better indication of project health. So in summary, the cost, budget, and cost planning processes involve cost estimating, cost budgeting, which is multiplying cost estimates of each item by the number required from this item to get a cost budget for a certain item. And when we add all the items, we aggregate the budget for the entire project. And once we have the budget for the entire project, we produce a project baseline, which is interrelation or relationship between time and money. That is when each amount of money shall be required. And after I have a project baseline, I start to control my baseline using earned value analysis. And like we said, we have to use a dedicated project management software. And always remember, when we are discussing project management in this aspect, we are talking about big projects that spans more than 1 year, has more than 100 employees, has a budget of at least $10 million. And these are minimum values for us to use a dedicated project management methodology, either traditional or agile or whatever. So we have to understand we are talking about very big projects with long durations and huge budgets. Therefore, we have to use project management softwares. Now, with this, we have come to the end of our webinar for today. I thank you very much for your patience and attendance, and wish you a very pleasant evening, and bid you good night. Thank you very much.